paid about $70 altogether to procure these lenses you see before you. And they served me well through my filmmaking journey so far. While I definitely love me a tack-sharp, neutral-looking modern autofocus lens for most client work, the majority of the art that I make for myself is done with this little kit of old 35mm film lenses. But the question, of course, is why would you use cheap, out-of-date crap when you have expensive lenses in your kit? And for that matter, can it actually make you better at filmmaking? Of course it can. Why else would I be making this video? You know one when you see one, but ironically, sufferers of gear acquisition syndrome don't usually know how obvious they are. Yeah, I rode Gear Trail for a while. I wandered them plains with a hot chunk of carbon fiber at my side. It was a lonely, dusty life, never sitting still. Out there, the cutting wind to my face and the hot sun beating down on my back, there was only ever one thought flying around my brain like a buzzard. Buy more shit! That sad sack cowpoke didn't know it, but it wasn't gear he was chasing. It was inspiration. Marketing departments want you to think that it's new gear and plastic things that open up creative possibilities, but that's only part of the picture. Because most of the time, it's actually the limitations that we run into while on a project that force us to be creative and solve problems in new ways. And well, it's definitely the most reliable method to get there. So enter my old Minolta lenses. So far I have a 28mm f2.8, a 50mm f1.8, an 85mm f2.8, and an 80 to 200 something. I'm already bored. These are a lot of numbers. Just look on the lens. All of these can be procured on the cheap from eBay or pawn shops, and all are manual focus only, and they're all super light and small. They're poorly coated against ghosting and flaring, and they're not sharp. They're subject to some pretty egregious chromatic aberration, and they all lean pretty strongly yellow and green. Yet somehow they're also perfect for achieving all sorts of great vintage looks and always bring their own character to the table. Hello everyone, I'm Unscripted Bobby. This is what the desert looks like when you turn the green screen off. These are vintage lenses, they're not new, so there are some limitations. First of all, they're soft. They're not very sharp lenses, especially if you shoot them wide open, which you absolutely should, especially if you haven't got much time on the day, like actually at the shoot. I recommend buying an on-camera monitor if you don't have one already, because manual focus plus soft lens plus tiny screen equals missed focus, even if your vision is perfect. At least for me, I don't have very great vision, so I mean, you do you. Just not a thrill seeker, That should be obvious from some of this footage. I still miss focus with them. You should also consider what kind of look that you want for your project as well. For the most part, modern lenses are pretty neutral and are pretty easy to grade and consistent across the board. But vintage lenses, especially mass-produced ones like these, will bring all kinds of character to the image that you have to keep in mind if you want your finished product to have a look that diverges too far from said character. Basically, they do what they do. Then of course, they're just not new. They're not stabilized. They don't have autofocus. And sometimes if you get them, they're not perfectly taken care of, so you might have to like clean them off or like make some repairs on them. They're really light and they're small, so it can sometimes be tough to pull focus without like wang-jangling the camera around all willy-nilly. They have small filter threads, which is a bit of a pain when you've only got a few filters and you rely on step-up rings to mount them. There's just a certain level of convenience and quality of life that I've grown to expect from modern lenses that obviously you just don't get on something that you pulled off of eBay. But after I learned to accept that different tools have different limitations and started to focus on what these do really well, I discovered something that's so important, so monumental, that I'm going to do the big words on the screen thing again. You can either buy tools to do a certain job, or you can change the job to suit your tools. A huge part of creating is just dealing with limitations, and that's at any level. From $40 million Hollywood features to $40 backyard short films, you're gonna have situations where you find yourself improvising based on your equipment and circumstances. Be flexible. Look, you're just probably never going to have everything you want at the time that you want it on any project that you're on. So you might as well play to the strengths of what you have and let creativity come out of that. Which, brings me back to these little guys. I'm showing footage that was all shot with these lenses, and there were definitely certain things I couldn't do. There were colors and textures that couldn't easily be altered or removed in post. These things flare sometimes even when you don't actually want them to, which can actually be a pain in the butt to control. Chromatic aberration is so bad on the 80 to 200 that I'd consider this shot unusable in most paid projects. But I conceptualized, wrote, and shot these pieces myself. I knew what these lenses would give me, and so I chose to create videos to capitalize on their specific look and vibe, instead of trying to make them do something that they wouldn't be able to anyway. I wish I could go back 15 years and tell my younger self this. You'll likely never reach a point where you feel like you're good enough to make the art that you want to make, so just stop waiting until you feel like you can, or until you're older, until you're completely confident to take risks. You probably don't need to shoot your story with an Alexa, especially if that means you have to wait even one more day than necessary to tell a good story. In all likelihood, you might not even be able to make it look better with an Alexa than you would with what you've already got anyhow. I've spent way too much of my life so far in a holding pattern, trying to build myself up to some imaginary level of being ready instead of just making things. I put off taking risks on myself to do stuff I really want to do because I've always just convinced myself that I wasn't there yet. But that's dumb, because I was ready. And you probably are too. And honestly, that's probably the best thing about showing up on set, pulling out a digital camera, and then snapping on a cheap $20 manual lens. I feel like I'm taking back my art into my own hands, not relying on equipment, and I couldn't be happier with how much imposing limitations on my work has helped me to grow in this past couple of years. So do you use old janky equipment when you're making things? What's your favorite way to impose limitations on yourself? Let me know in the comments. Please like and subscribe for more vibes like this, and until next time, make like that truck and stay weird. But stay and leave like a truck.